Great. Good to see all of you and to be here in this conversation with you. So we have sort of a short amount of time, short in that I think each of you I have heard speak and could continue to speak for a long, long time. So hopefully we will just get to give people a flavor, perhaps. But again, I think conferences are usually about starting conversations, not ending them. I hope everyone leaves with who do you want to connect with next, and what thread do you want to kind of pull at moving forward from here. So to get us started, the question we're sort of asking all of our speakers, particularly our plenary speakers, to reflect and share about is our theme that we set as literacy and justice for all. We have an intention of why we chose that theme. We talked about that a little bit this morning, of the moment and opportunity we're in, how literacy is the social justice issue of our time that we are contending with in our work at the coalition. And that there is really not just urgency in Oakland, but there is really a great, I mean, you could see the folks who've been participating so far today, people who are really doing the work to not just connect literacy and justice, but to further both of those. And so with that, I will ask each of you to just kind of use this moment to share what that means for you, how it connects to your own story, and a little bit about yourselves. And I will hand it over to one of you.
I can kick us off. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be in space with all of you. Again, my name is Aija Simmons, and I'm a longtime Oakland teacher. I've been working in OUSD for about 15, 16 years, and I currently work with the social and emotional learning team. From that lens, thinking about literacy and justice for all, the question I would start off with thinking about is, what does it mean to belong to a literate community? And what does it mean to belong in a literate society? When I think about my own journey with literacy and growing up, I grew up in a family of educators, right? I grew up in the Black church. And I think about never actually having a view of literacy that was just housed inside the container of a school, right? When we went to church, we went to Sunday school. In Sunday school class, there were cards with scriptures to learn and lessons to read. When we went to choir rehearsal, the lyrics of the choir song was on a paper, and the choir members would be reading off the lyrics of whatever new song they were going to learn. We helped each other after school. When moms couldn't pick one another up, we went to other people's houses, and older kids helped younger kids. And literacy wasn't something that I was taught was just housed in school. And my grandmother and grandfather made sure that we knew that these systems weren't designed for us. So it was our business as a community to support one another, to have access. And that meant having access through text, having access through critical conversations, having access to what it meant to be literate in multiple ways, and to be literate in our own history. So I hold that lens of what all does it take to belong to a literate community, and how do we wrap around our students, because literacy cannot just be housed in schools. So how do we create community partnerships and notice all of the literacies that are living inside a community, and just elevate literacy overall?
Aija, that's incredible. I love hearing that. I wish I would have had that upbringing, those elements in your upbringing. Dana, Cilono, and I see so many people in this space whose voices and perspectives I would love to hear and see at a later date. We'll have to make another one of these events. And for me, this theme around justice and literacy feels so personal. It gets me fired up. I almost had to check myself coming into today, because I was like, don't go there, Dana. Just speak truth, but because it gets me really emotional. Literacy, and when I similar to what Aija was saying, like there are literacy has so many dynamics. So when I'm talking about literacy, yes, I'm talking about reading and writing, but I'm also talking about language and all the things that comprise literacy. And so all of those aspects really define the human existence, right? They support growth and connection and enlightenment and liberation. And one's ability to talk, read, and write can also be prohibitive in their endeavors, crippling, right? It can really impact what people can achieve and their identities sometimes. And the reason why this makes me so fired up and so literacy gets me so excited and so frustrated is that I read something recently, I have it here, it says, researchers now estimate that 95% of all children can be taught to read by the end of first grade, with future achievement constrained only by students' reasoning and listening comprehension abilities. And when I think about that, and I think about how far we are, and when I say that, I am talking about kind of like our standard metrics for understanding reading and where kids are right now. And I realize that that's a very limited perspective, but with all of these things, with the things that families are doing at home, with the things that are happening in the community, and with the things that are happening in the schools, like we should be a lot closer than that, and we're not. And the reason why it matters to me is because talking, reading, writing is fundamental to the human experience. And for many children, and children of color are prohibited more than other demographics. And we know that there are a lot of things behind that. But this feels like a concerted effort. It's like a concerted effort to prevent them from leveraging the things that they are entitled to by being human. And so this theme feels just like incredibly important, energizing. I was energized just thinking about it. And then I came to the opening and I was like, oh no, now I'm even more pumped. I'm even more excited. So super happy to be here.
Hi everyone, Dulce Torres-Petty here. I shared earlier with both Dana and Aija that I was very honored to share this space with them, and I just want to emphasize it just after hearing you. I mean, I know you, you're my friends, and I love you, and just this reminds me of why I love you all so much. So this is this is a thing that is very personal to me. As an immigrant, I didn't grow up in the United States. I migrated to the United States when I was an adult. So my entire educational experience was really in Mexico, with teachers that look like me, with other classmates that look like me. So a lot of these conversations are actually a little bit like difficult for me to kind of like situate in my brain, because I don't have the experiences. I do have the experience of being an English language learner and how difficult that is and how difficult that was for me. And it still is. I still consider myself an English language learner. Just like Aija, I was raised by my grandparents, and they were both rural teachers. So to me, when I think about justice in education, I think also about decolonizing, because my grandparents, even though like I grew up in a very urbanized area in Mexico, I grew up in Mexico City, my grandparents brought from their rural towns in Oaxaca a lot of the experiences and knowledge and culture and traditions that they had in Oaxaca, which is a very rural area. So to me, I had the benefit from learning from them, and kind of like some of the things that I was hearing earlier today is like it's just like this, like kind of like empowering the communities that we already have with like bringing the knowledge that they already have. Like not everyone has an educator certificate, not everyone it's like going to school to be a teacher, but everyone has the ability to teach another child. And most importantly, everyone has in their life a child that they love. And I think that's where people can really make a difference. So I felt really loved by my grandparents and felt their love through their teaching. And that's what I like, we can do like in a small amount, or we can do it in a big amount, whether we're in a classroom and we're teaching 20 kids, showing their love. I was looking at the video of Karim earlier, and I was moved to tears, because it was not just like the practice of like teaching to read or all that. It was just like the love, the dedication of like a person that's right there believing in someone, and that someone can achieve reading or anything that they can think of. So this is why this work is incredibly personal, important, very close to my heart.
Thank you to the three of you. Again, I'm so appreciative when people share a piece of themselves. Sometimes it's easy to talk about work and the work we do, but it's very different when we talk about our own stories. And I think that's the starting. And I see the last comment in the chat says literacy is love. And I think that's really modeled here by the ways you all are speaking. So, we put this kind of conversation together with the real idea around, we know that for a lot of folks, their story of learning to read is impacted, driven, led by their own identity, whether that's your own personal, I learned to read in, learning to read in 2 different languages. There's something about that, or to Dulce's story, of how much it just plays into our identity. It becomes about, right? Literacy, the ability to read, the things we read and how we share stories shapes our world that we come from and the world that we belong to in our building. And so I think the conversation around representation, the conversation around how every one of our personal stories drives the work we do is really important when we think about not just our experiences as people of color, but also our experience as leaders in education, whether you're in the classroom now, come out of the classroom, serve children and families in another way, how your stories shape the way that you approach your own work, doing as a leader in your communities. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time asking you all to share your story, thought, reflection on where representation has sat for you when you think about your own leadership story, what that might look like, what's missing, and what's possible when we support educators and leaders of color who are supporting our students. So again, I will let anyone who's kind of feeling moved to speak first open us up.
I guess I can share a little bit of what I think that sort of is missing for me. I spoke a little earlier about colonization and how that impacts our minds and the way in which we perceive the world. So a little bit of that, it's like, even this thing of like English language learning, at the end of the day, that's very colonizing. And not that it's not important, like it's incredibly important that the language is spoken here. But I think the part of what I would love to see, and it's sort of like a dream, it's like other languages being taught in schools. Like, we have a big mom community. We have, like all kinds of languages in Oakland specifically. And I feel like there's a big opportunity for not like sort of like thinking of like other people assimilating too, but also us like kind of like learning about that, like embracing those cultures, embracing those languages, and sort of like going back to that. Because a lot of the learning that actually I think that it's really important that it happens through generations. It's taught through like that, like a narrative, right? That you can only sometimes share in your own language. So when you go back to those roots, if you don't do it, then you're missing a big piece of knowledge and appreciation and what Aija was sharing earlier of like knowing your history and how important that is.
I'm gonna pick up on what you're saying, Dulce, because I think it's so critical. You started with talking about decolonizing, and I want to also connect to something that Dana said about identity, and really bring up that often when we talk about literacy, we talk about literacy out of the context of history. And so we miss that many of the barriers that have been put in place were systemic barriers that turned into stereotypes and attacked people's identities, right? It's like we have to support people of color to be literate. Well, what does that mean? And what are you really saying, right? When people's identities in terms of literacy have been attacked historically through oppressive systems, And now we want to fix kids as opposed to fix oppressive systems. And so I love that this is about literacy and justice, because when I think about early literacy, and I'm raising a 6-year-old now, when I think about her early literacy, yep, phonemes are important. Yes, sounds are important. Sight words are important, but there is so much more early literacy happening, right? And there are so many things that our children are becoming literate in terms of communication skills and how to be in the world and how to be with other students, that if we just label literacy as phonemes and letters and sounds, then what can we further do? We can further oppress a group of people for whom English sounds like, I consider myself very literate. Some of these English sounds I don't make, they don't come out. And I used to worry about that. It used to bother me, like in public forums, if I had a way to say a word that wasn't the proper way to say a word, or if something rolls off my tongue and sound kind of hood, right? Those kinds of things that deem you either literate or illiterate are oppressive. So as we think about elevating literacy and wanting to give all children access to literacy, we have to think more broadly, and we have to think about supporting students to develop another literacy, right? This reading and English thing is one literacy. It's not the literacy. And when we come from that place, then we support kids, we help kids, we build community, just like helping them to learn how to ride a bike. We have fun with them, we cheer them on. We don't weigh them down with the burden of riding a bike, right? It's like, this is something we're gonna have fun doing, learn how to ride a bike. But we tend to weigh kids down with the burden of whether they know their letters and sounds and sight words, and how many do you know? Do you know 20 or do you know 10? Did you know letter G by the time we got to this month of the year? So oppressive. When kids want to come in from a place of joy and want to be celebrated for all of the literacies that they have and be offered another literacy, right? So I think it's important to hold that historically, people have been oppressed and that oppression has been attached to their identity. So we have to do the work of elevating the literacies that our students have and then continuously offer them additional literacies.
I love that. I mean, you know, the written word was created by certain cultures, not all cultures, to capture their thoughts and their language, right? And that evolved to be like and now the written word holds a whole lot of weight. And if it's, in some cases, if it's not written down, and if it's not written down, it doesn't matter. And if you can't read it well, sorry. And so there's I can connect to a lot of what you're saying. And that's why I love to focus on the significance of oral language and vocabulary in literacy, because I think the lens can be really focused. Like, yes, they need to know all of the elements of literacy. And I was a kid who, like, I didn't learn how to read by 3rd grade. I didn't know how to read. I sailed through 3rd grade. I don't know how I sailed through 3rd grade, but I made it through 3rd grade, not feeling super successful. And it wasn't until I was in 4th grade when I had a teacher, Miss Clausen, I'll never forget her, teacher of color, my only one in elementary school. And I could tell when she looked at me, she never told me, but I could tell when she looked at me, she was like, you don't know how to read, and we're going to fix that. Like I could talk in class, I would participate. There were all these other things, but I couldn't actually read. And that was prohibiting me. It was prohibiting my growth, because we live in this system that relies so much on the written word. And so she kept me before school every day. And like, I wasn't the only one, but there were kids. She showed up every day early and we came to school, and I hated it, but I knew she had high expectations of me, and I knew that she believed in me. And I remember thinking about my 3rd grade teacher and how, like, in some ways it was super easy, but I remember thinking that teacher was so mean because she could see me struggling and she didn't do anything to help. And it wasn't until I had that teacher in 4th grade who was like, you're going to show up at 7:45, come every day. And by the end of, I mean, I didn't have the same experience that Dr. Alexander did, where, you know, he made it all the way to high school. I was able to get where I needed to be at the end of fourth grade. And for that, I will be forever, forever grateful. And I knew that this was a career for me, because years later, when I became a teacher in Oakland, I went to an open court training at the Hilton over by the airport. And I sat down at a table, and the woman I sat next to was my fourth grade teacher, Miss Clausen. So I learned how to teach children how to read by sitting next to the woman who taught me how to read. And that's when I knew, like, this is the work I need to be doing.
That's so, that image just is so powerful of the full circle moment, and how much that kind of impactful teaching and mentoring can stay with us literally for our whole lives. We have about 7 or 8 minutes. And I'd love to either, if you want to respond to kind of the theme that you've already started, but I'll just add, again, as we bring together folks who are impacting student learning and literacy in different ways, right? We're not all here from the same path we've walked or the same path we're walking now, which I think is the beautiful thing, right? There are different ways we make impact. There are different ways we influence these outcomes. But knowing that there's kind of that broad audience, what you would want to leave folks with when you think about this theme of leadership and representation, how we've been asking folks to ask how they might move differently, or how we might want folks to move differently as we share our stories, or what they might bring and carry with them. Again, when we think about having to imagine and believe what's possible for all of our kids before we can make change.
I'll offer one thing. There's a short story in it, in that I was in a position in Oakland not too many years ago, and I'm not as far along the road as Dulce and Aija are in many ways, but in one of those ways is I was in a position where I needed to hire a whole bunch of literacy tutors, and immediately I thought, okay, let me reach out to the teacher prep programs and community colleges and all these things, because in my mind I thought whoever's going to be working with children has to have the credentials to do so. And I couldn't fill the positions. And it wasn't even my idea. Someone came up with the idea. It was like, well, we have, there are all these families who are in the community. They're at the school all day long. They want to help. Like, they can work with kids. And I remember feeling hesitant. My internalized depression, I felt hesitant. And I was like, let's try it. I felt like I was pushed in a corner. That's what forced me to be able to even go there. And it has been an incredible experience. There are pathways now for community-based literacy leaders that live in the community, whose children go to the community, who are teachers at schools. And that was a learning for me. The takeaway from that story is I had to pause my own biases and thoughts about what was right in education in order to support children. And when I was able to let that go, amazing innovation happened that really, I think, benefited the communities better. So that would be the thing I'd offer.
You almost stole those things for me. That I was thinking the exact same thing, that the power is within us and within our community. Michael earlier in a chat was sharing, just like really, gathering together abuelas, tias, aunties, all kinds of people that are in the community to teach the kids. And I think that you can see the power there, right? And everything that we talk about representation, and the other thing that Karim said this morning that was so important, it's just like the regular people, right? Like for us, it's regular people. For the kids, they're their own heroes, just like they were my heroes are my grandparents. And like, yes, of course, like everyone wants to I think that given the chance, in the opportunity and the belief and the faith, like people can actually do a lot when we like combine effort and knowledge and experience, and young people too. Like when we about like even mentoring programs of like the Kings, that I was hearing from earlier, you know, what a powerful thing, like to have you know, students in our communities that also want to support each other, to like with young learners, and young learners look up to them. Like I was seeing that with the Aspire Education Project a while ago too. Like they love working with the high schoolers, and it's just I mean, when it's like, again, like I guess it's that, it's like the power is with our own community.
I had no idea I was going to say this, but this is what's moving me right now. As I listen to all of the stories on the screen, I'm thinking about growing up and hearing my grandmother's literacy story, knowing my dad's literacy story, and those things not being foreign to me. I think we need to take the mystery out of literacy for our children and talk about how we learn to read, our process for learning to read with students. Students should know a little bit about their teacher's backstory with literacy and what literacy meant to them and where they struggled, right? So that our students don't feel like becoming literate is this impossible, mysterious thing that they just can't get. How do we share human beings, and story is so powerful. So how do we continue to share story and make those stories available to our students so that they can access, like, you know, there's not one way to become literate. There's not, you know, people become literate later, they become literate at different paces. So how do we, as communities, begin to actually elevate our own literacy stories for our young people so that they know that it's never over and it's never too late, and we keep practicing and we persevere until we all together belong to a powerful and literate community.
All three of you have touched on so many things that I think are so near and dear for me, but that bring up new things. Like Aija, I'm thinking now, I know my own story of how I learned to read. I talk about that quite a bit in forums like this, and with my mom, who's actually able to attend a session earlier, who's been a lifelong educator. But I haven't asked the story beyond that, right? I don't know how my grandparents learned to read, or how my mom was, you know, I know she now teaches, but it made me really, especially, you know, not living in the country my parents are from, or grandparents live in, like what that connection might mean to actually be able to share that story with them and understand them, and how it might inform me as I build my own practice and work. So I appreciate you inspiring me to do that. And I heard, Dana, in your comment, really speaking to what Kareem called us all to do this morning, which was to take, you know, we have to kind of try the thing and take the risk that's not comfortable, that might feel right. And the, you know, he asked us to listen to the dissidents, and not to pit you as a dissident, but what happens differently when we listen to the people we don't start out thinking we agree with, right? I've worked with high schoolers in a youth leadership program for many years, and they do these like debate formats that often pit them against each other. They learn a lot, but I'm also often trying to ask them to be willing to be wrong. And instead, how much more powerful would it be if winning your debate, you were willing to say, I changed my mind and I learned something new. And so thank you all for kind of drawing those moments out for us to model and to share. I want to thank you. We are at time, so I want to thank the three of you for coming on and talking and sharing with us. Hopefully, folks, again, if you have ways you want to connect, jump on that Whova app. You can still ask questions in the app next to the session. We can relay those, and you can certainly find a way to get connected with folks. So thank you, and join me in thanking them as I transition us to close out just these last 10 minutes together. So we have just a few minutes, and I hope you all will stay tuned for just a little bit longer. I want to, again, for those of you who've been here all day, I hope hearing these stories has prompted you to share your story with one other person here today in some format. And I'm feeling like there has been that theme of sharing a piece of ourselves. And that's why I'm very excited to have Nehemiah Vaughn from Youth Speaks to join us to share a piece with us. Again, the sharing him piece of, I think when you perform, you're sharing a piece of yourself. So I am excited to invite them up to do that. Nehemiah Vaughn is also known as Nuisance. He's a Gemini, 21 years old, and loves music. Music isn't just some hobby or something to pass the time. It's his passion in life. Music has saved Nehemiah from dark times, and he has learned that it has saved others as well. Originally from West Oakland, Nehemiah plans to turn the entire world into something that everyone will grow to love and appreciate, which I almost feel like that's it. That's the story. That was so beautifully written. So Nehemiah, thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm kind of shy because, like, hearing everything, I wanted to, like, tear up a little bit because it was just hearing everything just, like, really got to me. This is very, very true what was being said. Like, we have the power within our communities, especially, and just, yeah. But, so this is a piece I wrote. Kind of took the inspiration from a little bit of myself. So, yeah. Congratulations to the very first unlucky winner of the afternoon. Yes, I'm referring to the little black boy balled up in my belly that is still hurt and tainted by the presence of his father's absence. Anyway, securities can go out the window, and stereotypes that you sadly fall under because of your father deciding to be out of your life and teaching you how to be a man in reverse are yours, even though you don't understand it. And now you're upset. But for what? I mean, I thought that you knew this is the standard that society pushes onto you. Anyway, you gotta accept it now. You just won these beautiful silver bracelets that were designed with your name on them. Well, maybe not your name specifically, but I mean, who cares? I heard they were made to fit people who look just like you. And anyway, their brown skin, tar black, nappy hair, guilty until proven innocent, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe these bullets take away his innocence. I mean, watch the way that Glock 17 leaves his body with a stain and a scent. I mean, innocent until proven guilty, brown eyes. Now I know what you're thinking, and trust me, I wish that this wasn't the case that was always made when profiling our innocent young black men or any of our kids, but I see you have a boyfriend, even though you're a boy yourself, and that goes against anything that this capitalist and sexist society has taught you. He gets a prize too. I mean, it's only fair that both of you get something right because I can't give one person something and not the other. Well, guess what? You, little boy, also get the exact same gift. Those silver bracelets that has your memorial engraved onto the inside. I mean, not that you're the same as the first young man, but it's okay because I know you're kind. You're a heathen. I mean, you're a farm worker. I mean, you're a hard worker. You're legally here. And I meant to say, you're lovely in every way. Besides, you're Mexican, not Mexican. And this is what's being fed to my generation, to the young men, women, and non-conforming. And it's sad that it's been something that's pushed on to all my people of color, especially when all they need is a little TLC. Layla, Justin, or better yet known as Jay Wald, Avon, Javen, Colette, my friends TJ, Chris, Tamira, just a couple of people. They're just a few people of my generation and youth that have shown me that this world can be greater than it is. But the way that starts is by showing the youth that you care, and in a way that they can understand, not to your understanding. So Generation Z and etc., you guys are gonna have to provide this world with the tools to break down the barriers that different groups of ancestors have put up. And that's that.
I think, can we mic off? I feel like that was, thank you for that. I don't know if folks are able, but I'm seeing the clapping. Nehemiah, thank you for sharing that piece and for sharing that piece of yourself. I think art, poetry, performance grounds us in our why, and not just our why for literacy. I mean our why, our purpose, our being. It offers us a shared experience together. So I think also what you just gave us was an opportunity to share that together in this space, and to explore a little more about ourselves. So it was the perfect way to, I think, bring this day to a close. And I thank you. I'm just going to close briefly by coming back to the morning, to say in the morning, I asked, for all of us to set an intention as we move throughout the rest of the day, to think of your own story and your own purpose as you reflect on the conversations happening. We're heading into day 2 tomorrow. I hope you can tune in with us. I know the question I'm asking myself as I probably take some time to decompress today before I start thinking about tomorrow, which is how am I a collaborator? How am I an ally? How am I a co-conspirator to transform the way we teach, support, and nurture our kids? And how can we ask this of ourselves and one another? I want to preview just really briefly in this last minute. Tomorrow we have another amazing performance by another poet to kick us off in the morning. And the VTA Collective, please check out their bios, are going to be leading us in a really special session. That is, we're not going to have any webinar formats tomorrow. They'll all be that kind of more Zoom session so that you can engage. But they're going to ask us to also, through a kind of exercise, connect in our personal why to drive change. We have lots of breakout sessions. Again, take a look at them. The names of the session alone, if you don't catch the full description, are pretty incredible. And then in the afternoon, we're going to close with Dr. Julie Washington of UC Irvine, her session, Literacy, a Liberatory Civil Right. Aja, when you spoke, it really made me think, oh, now I really extra can't wait for Dr. Washington, because her work and research is at the intersection of language, literacy variation, and poverty, but specifically she does a lot of work around the impact of cultural dialect on early literacy skill and how we leverage that for language development, and how we've too often seen that, I think, to what many of you said, as kind of working against our kids instead of working for them. We'll also be joined by newly elected Assembly Member Mia Bonta. And then we will end with Breathe for Change, Michelle Cordero, who will lead us, for those of you who want to stick around, to get some movement and self-care to close out our day. So we got a big day again tomorrow. I thank each of you for bringing yourselves and staying engaged and energizing me for another day. So thank you all, and have a good, restful, and do something that brings you joy today. And we'll see you tomorrow morning.